Hey kiddies, it's Terrible Triple Feature time once again, and this week it's the Snowpiercer Jamboree. That's right, weekends should return to me soon, so this will be the last of the twofers, even though we're actually going to be doing 3 twofers, so it's sort of triple still. And in order to do this, the triple feature, or 3 double features, you'd need to watch Snowpiercer 3 times, or you could just be nice and watch Snowpiercer once and watch the other 4 movies. Snowpiercer is the post-apocalyptic action sci-fi thriller starring Chris Evans, who is stuck in the one place on the planet Earth that you can still live in, this giant train called the Snowpiercer. Or actually, no, I don't think the train is called the Snowpiercer, but it's kind of implied that it's the titular Snowpiercer. Chris Evans is running a revolution against the higher classes of people that are in the front of the train, as he is in the rear of the train, because, Jesus Christ, the world has ended and you're still lording it over the poor people? What the hell is wrong with you? After watching this movie, which I really liked, it was just a lot of fun and very interesting, and I thought it was, just the closest we've gotten to a new Terry Gilliam film since Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And before you point out, yes, I am very well aware that Terry Gilliam's made movies since Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Just, none of them have been worth a damn. Even Parnassus, man. Parnassus was just boring. I'm very excited about Zero Theorem, don't get me wrong, but until then, Snowpiercer! Our first double feature, because these are all double features because it is really hyper-specific. Although this first one, I think there could have been a third, I just haven't had the time to get around to finding it. High-concept sci-fi films that are reusing one set over and over again. Snowpiercer, it takes place on a train. So while the different cars of the train, depending on what their use or who's living in them, it's possible that this was all just like 1 or 2 train car sets that were being perpetually changed around, redressed, and turned into other things. It's a way to keep things cheap. Another sci-fi movie that does this to great effect is Cube. And if you haven't seen Cube, what are we doing here? But Cube is a great Canadian sci-fi film by Vincenzo Natali. And it's basically first-year philosophy done as a sci-fi horror film. And it's brilliant because everybody is trapped in this, maybe a prison, maybe a lab experiment. We honestly just have no idea. But 6 people are stuck in a cube. And their cube leads to other cubes. It seems to be a giant matrix of cubes, and each cube has something different about them. There might be traps, there might not be traps. And you watch the movie, and I think I looked this up, there were only ever actually 2 cubes, that way you have your one cube and another cube to look through the doorway at a different one. So that was all they needed. And basically they just kept changing the lighting gels in the back to create the illusion of an almost infinite number of cubes. Much like one train car over and over and over again. Clever. This is how you save money and put that money back into, say, makeup effects or visual effects to make your sci-fi film that much stronger. It's awesome. Cube, man. Cube and Snowpiercer. Put them together. Good times. The next possibility for a double feature would be the world's gotten cold, so Chris Evans has gotten in a tube. In Snowpiercer, it's to escape the frozen hostile wasteland that the planet has created as a result of its experiments in combating the effects of greenhouse gases. In Sunshine, the world has gotten colder because the sun is dying, and Chris Evans is, I believe, the computer and/or just general handyman of the Icarus 2 that is attempting to deliver a giant fissile payload into the sun to reignite it. Don't worry about the science in Sunshine. It's not really the point of the movie. The point of the movie is all these people trapped under very high pressure with the fate of the entire world on them. In Snowpiercer, in a very similar and more class system sort of way, Chris Evans is leading a revolution that could change the very nature of the world because the only living people are on this tube. And so if you change the way everything works there, you are changing the world and possibly saving it. You will have to see the movie to find out. In each one, Sunshine was the movie that I mean, I had seen Chris Evans before in the Fantastic Four films, and even though those are just abysmal, he was always a great Johnny Storm. But it wasn't until Sunshine that I was like, yeah, this guy could be Captain America, because Sunshine's just great. I mean, I love it, on one hand. On the other hand, it's very tricky in terms of film criticism, because the movie's great for 2/3, and then the last third of the movie, it kind of goes off into a completely different direction that, if I'm being completely honest, is not worthy of the film that preceded it, but the horror movie fan in me just loves it. As opposed to Snowpiercer, which is pretty solidly consistent and weird and crazy throughout. So while there are tonal shifts depending on who the Chris Evans and company are interacting with, or the type of train car they're in, it's more built into the story than Sunshine. But either way, very, very high concept, and end of the world. Earth has gotten colder, and so Chris Evans is in a giant metal tube. Finally, we have Ed Harris Runs Crazy Town. Ed Harris plays Wilford, the Howard Hughes-esque eccentric billionaire who had the wherewithal to build this train that turned out to be the only place people could survive after it had the planet Earth had turned into a frozen hostile wasteland. He's, I mean, he was probably pretty batty to begin with, and just living on this train for, 20 or so years has just made him even crazier and more eccentric. But it's Ed Harris, so it's just brilliant. He's basically the final boss that Chris Evans has to deal with in order to save the soul of humanity. Whether or not that's successful, you'll have to see. There are distinct parts of Snowpiercer that feel very influenced by BioShock in terms of a, rich person designed a facility for society that would be cut off from everyone else, and, some form of worship thereof. And while it's built up, Ed Harris just totally delivers once you finally get to him. The other movie that would go with this is The Truman Show, the Jim Carrey film in which an infant is adopted and raised in a fake world for reality television, all at the idea of Kristoff, played by Ed Harris. He's easily more grounded than Wilford in Snowpiercer, even though Kristoff, most of the time you see him, he's in his, airy, watching over everything and deciding what happens to Truman as if he were God. He's just eccentric enough and weird enough to really sell that this guy thought this whole thing was a great idea, which is pretty nutty. Truman Show, just great. I mean, it was one of those first real glimpses of Jim Carrey's acting ability outside of bending over and speaking out of his ass. Ed comes through as, it's Ed Harris. He comes through like he always does to deliver some of the most meaningful dialogue throughout the whole film. Not just throughout it, but just the whole conversation between Kristoff and Truman at the end is just beautiful. And you really feel that Kristoff does genuinely care for Truman and never wanted to hurt him, even though this is just the craziest thing in the world. Much in the same way that, you'd have to see Snowpiercer, but I'm not completely convinced that Wilford is as elitist as he has to be to play the role that he is. But, you're not sure. This sort of ambiguity is why we hire Ed Harris, because he's brilliant. So, 3 double features for Snowpiercer. High concept, one set sci-fi films, the world's gone cold so Chris Evans is in a tube, and Ed Harris Runs Crazy Town. Hopefully I'll be back next week with an honest-to-God triple feature, and I will see you then.